I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. Congressman Lee Zeldin revealed a 10-part plan on Monday for New Yorkers to, quote, have more faith in government. The congressman is running for governor of New York and was joined in Syracuse by Allison Esposito, who is New York's GOP lieutenant governor candidate. One of Zeldin's first points was to double down on his call for term limits. Here's more from the New York Republican.
Name. And she decided, when presented with so many more of the facts of the scandal and investigation, she tripled down. She decided to cover for Brian Benjamin, and she expressed her total confidence in the lieutenant governor. It was just 1 week later then that a prosecutor arrested and indicted Brian Benjamin, and that was the day that he resigned. So in order to restore trust in government, to reform Albany, we're here this morning to unveil a 10-part plan that would allow New Yorkers to once again be able to have more faith in government, to feel like they have a voice and representation, to feel like their state senators and their state assemblymen, even if they were a freshman in the minority party or they were the Senate Majority Leader, that everyone would feel like they have a voice in Albany. First and foremost, I believe that it's important to establish term limits. I have long called for term limits for 2 terms, 4 years each, for the office of governor, lieutenant governor, for all statewide positions. I believe that you should bring your ideas, your energy, you try to make a positive impact, and then you move along. Second, it is important for us to overhaul the Joint Commission on Public Ethics. There is now a new name coming after some tweaks were made to it in the budget process that just passed, to lay out some of our proposals for a new ethics agency. It should be made up of 8 commissioners, 4 appointed by Democrats, 4 appointed by Republicans. Elected party leadership at the state capitol should agree for all appointees for each commissioner. Equal representation in an ethics oversight agency needs to be as fair as it can be from the start if you want people to take it seriously. This was one of the major flaws of JCO. Making the commission smaller would not only save taxpayers more of their hard-earned money, but also make the commission run more efficiently. The commission would have one head commissioner chosen by the governor. A majority vote would be required for decisions by the commission. In the event there is a tie, the measure would not advance. Each commissioner's term would be for 2 years. However, they can be reappointed and vacancies can be filled as soon as possible. The commission would have subpoena power and would be able to vote to refer criminal cases to a prosecutor to handle legally. The commission would also have civil enforcement power against statewide officials. Candidates for those offices, executive branch officers and employees, members of the legislature and legislative branch employees, candidates, as well as certain political party chairs and registered lobbyists and their clients. Also, JCO should be subject to the Freedom of Information Act. We must increase accountability for all New Yorkers. The third prong of our proposal this morning is delivering accountability for the Hochul administration's deadly nursing home order and cover-up. I believe that a special prosecutor should be appointed by the governor to pursue not just more answers, but also justice and accountability. Fourth, in New York State, we should create the Empire State Budget Office. This would be a legislative branch office that offers nonpartisan, objective, and impartial analysis of prospective legislation. New Yorkers, including state senators, members of the Assembly, the governor, comptroller, attorney general, all of our statewide officials should understand the costs and implications of enacting certain legislation before it is voted on by the legislature and signed by the governor. This benefits everybody, our elected officials, our oversight agencies, and New Yorkers overall, by increasing transparency and accountability. The fifth prong, strengthening New York State's Freedom of Information law. FOIL requests should move from a presumption of denial to a presumption of approval. And the onus should be on the state agencies to detail exactly why requests have been denied. There should be stricter timeline requirements if documents are accessible and readily retrievable. We also must end the three persons approach to governance. For too long, we've seen the governor, the Speaker of the Assembly, the Senate Majority Leader, behind closed doors, finalizing a budget agreement instead of being truly out in the open. We have 213 members of the New York State Legislature. They come from all parties, they come from all regions, counties, throughout the entire state. They represent different viewpoints, they have different ideas. And unfortunately, the three persons in a room approach consolidates all of this power up at the top. It's very secretive. Even members of the state legislature had no idea too often on too much of the budget what's going on and what's being agreed upon. They find out about it at the very last minute. Oftentimes, they're forced to vote on one of these appropriation bills, and they don't even know what's in it. They don't have enough time to read it, and they learn about what's in it after the budget's passed. We need to make sure that we are empowering all of our members of the legislature. The legislature is required to use a conference committee process between the two houses to organize its deliberations, set priorities, and reach agreement on a budget. However, it seems that the three persons in the room are not taking this very seriously. The first and only meeting that is on the conference's website for this year is a 15-minute long meeting from March 14th to discuss the executive budget. As governor, I would insist that the legislature take this process seriously. Specifically, I would offer the budget director and other high-level administration officials to testify in front of the committee so New Yorkers can get a better sense of where and how their elected officials are working for them. This would allow more of the rank-and-file state legislators to get more involved in the process. Next, it is important for both Else Esposito and I, as we're here today and we reflect on the budget process that just passed, for the governor and lieutenant governor to be more accessible to media during the budget process. The budget that just passed did not get done in time. It ended up passing 9 days later. Actually, the day that it was due on March 31st with roughly 10 hours to go before the deadline. The state legislature left Albany. They all went back to their districts. They basically threw in the towel. They went into a long weekend, and they didn't start getting back to work again until the next week. We saw one scene where the former Lieutenant Governor Brian Benjamin was running around corners of buildings, followed by the Albany Press Corps. They were desperate to ask questions, and sadly, unfortunately, they just were not able to get the Lieutenant Governor to stop, listen to the questions, and answer, because these members of the media were desperate to be able to do their jobs and to inform the public on what exactly was going on. So we both are pledging to be far more accessible to media, especially as going through that budget process, as we unfortunately just witnessed. Next, we need to provide better transparency across the board by expanding items that are automatically disclosed to the public. Documents obtained for investigations that have resulted in a case being referred to a prosecutor or have resulted in civil penalties should be made available for the public unless any materials violate FOIL. This JCOPE process needs more transparency as we go forward, as we need to truly overhaul JCOPE. It's important that all materials that are possibly in accordance with FOIL are provided to the public. Next, certain memos that are circulated by government agencies should also be made available online unless they violate FOIL. If there are actions that are taken by agencies through administrative memos that they do not want disclosed to the public, it should only be for security purposes, not to keep the public out of the loop. Our ninth of these 10 proposals is to reimagine New York State's websites. It can be tricky to find legislation and information for both current and former elected officials. The multiple websites New York State has to search for legislation are finicky, causing confusion and frustration for New Yorkers. For example, if you don't type in the exact bill number, including letters and dashes, it may not pop up. Similarly, if you search bill titles, hundreds of results may come up that have nothing at all to do with the legislation that you are searching for. Reimagining New York State's websites, including legislative ones, to resemble a website like congress.gov would increase transparency and help to restore trust amongst the electorate. Streamlining the multiple search engines and creating a user-friendly all-in-one website is what we have in mind. You have the State Senate, Assembly, and public.leginfo.state.ny, which can all be finicky search engines. The new search engine would also make it easier to find legislation and initiatives of former elected officials as well. And our 10th proposal, and I've long been a strong supporter of it, and as I travel around the state, there is strong bipartisan support for it as well, is voter ID. I believe that you should be required to show identification in order to vote. Honestly, this is very important to a lot of New Yorkers. And even if there might be some New Yorkers who feel like this isn't important to them, I'm telling you, there are far more New Yorkers who find this passionately important for them. They want to see it done in Albany. I personally believe that there should be voter ID in all 50 states. So those are the 10 planks of our Reform Albany agenda. We're honored to be unveiling them this morning in Syracuse for this first joint appearance between our next Lieutenant Governor, Allison Esposito, and I. And at this time, before answering any media questions, if there are any, I'd like to turn the floor over to our next Lieutenant Governor, Allison Esposito. Allison.
Good morning, everyone. The points in the plan that the Congressman just laid out for you is very simple. It's about transparency and accountability for your elected officials, for all of them. A place that hasn't had that for far too long. For almost 25 years, I was a cop in the NYPD. And this is incredibly important. I only stepped away from my role as a commanding officer in the New York City Police Department because I was sick to death of what was going on in Albany, Washington, and our elected officials. I was watching safety and security fall by the wayside, and I was watching accountability get less and less and less from the people that were voted into office, and it has to stop. This plan is very simple: transparency and accountability. Allowing New Yorkers, the ones who put us in office, the ones who put their trust in us, to make decisions on their behalf, know that we're actually making decisions on their behalf. They're informed. They know why we're making decisions and what they're based on. Freedom of information is important. New York needs to know what's going on. The three persons in a room approach cannot happen anymore. You can't see your elected officials literally running away from you. They are accountable to you, and they forgot that. They are accountable to New Yorkers. They are accountable to those who voted for them and to those who did not. And that is very much what this plan is taking into consideration. The Congressman mentioned term limits. That is so important. It is so important to get fresh blood into places, fresh ideas, unique perspectives. This is a government by the people, and the people should be involved in every step of the way. And voter ID helps to make sure that we have people that are supposed to be voting in our elections, voting in our elections. These are all very important facets. What you had in Albany for the last decade plus are people that were deaf to your concerns, that felt that they were not accountable to the people that placed them in office. I never would have stepped away from my position within the NYPD if I didn't feel that this was absolutely necessary. We are bringing ears back to Albany, a place that has been deaf for far too long. This 10-point plan is going to serve as a basis of our accountability and our pledge to be transparent with you. Our job is for you, and that's been forgotten, and it won't be going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Allison. Thank you to the members of the media here, also to the men and women in law enforcement who are present as well. We are extraordinarily grateful for your service and your sacrifice. As I travel around the state, this is a state that absolutely loves our law enforcement, our veterans, our firefighters, our EMTs, And one of the reasons why we get to live in the greatest nation in the history of the world is because of the sacrifice of dedicated public servants who continue to step up and answer the call. And if any members of the media have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Sure, politicians for years have been calling for cleaning up Albany, more transparency, and it never works, it never happens. Why is your plan different? What can you do as a minority in a Democratic-controlled town?
So first and foremost, the best thing to do to change Albany actually doesn't require a bill. It doesn't require an executive order. It's about integrity. It's about your leadership style. For one, I recall a string of members of Albany getting arrested. By the way, it still continues. I mean, it just happened again with the lieutenant governor. In the Army, and I'm in my 19th year in the Army, I serve as lieutenant colonel, and around my dog tags is the acronym LEADERSHIP. It's the 7 Army values: loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, personal courage. When I first joined Army ROTC and I put these Army values around my dog tags, the words had meaning, but not as much as once I had an opportunity to serve. Integrity should mean something. You can be a conservative, a moderate, a liberal. You can be a Republican, a Democrat, an independent. You can be from any county of all 62 counties throughout the state and step up and run. You're entitled to your ideas, your energy. We should have a debate. It's okay if there's a disagreement. And at the end of the day, the best idea should win. But first and foremost, we have to bring integrity back. Just the fact that Allison and I mean, here's one of the big differences. I'm a former prosecutor. Instead of having a lieutenant governor who has been dedicating his time running from the law, I would say it's progress, if I was to draw a 11th plank into this plan to reform Albany, to have a lieutenant governor who spends a career enforcing the law. That doesn't require a bill. It doesn't require an executive order. We have to improve the culture. I served 4 years, 2 terms in the New York State Senate. And during my time, I found, even back then, and it actually started before I got there, this, what then was called 3 men in a room. And then it became 4 men in a room, if you remember, because there was this coalition between Republicans and Democrats in the state Senate for a couple years. It was wrong then, it was wrong before I got there, and it's wrong now. I remember this budget process where a committee would meet, and it was just for show. It was just for camera. It was already decided what was going to happen. We weren't talking to each other about our ideas in front of you, in front of New Yorkers. They weren't able to hear us share what's on our mind. Now, by the way, what happens in Washington, in Congress, because the appropriation process starts out of the House, is that you have an appropriations committee. And they offer amendments, and they debate amendments, and then they vote amendments, and some pass and some fail. And then as you go through the process, the amendments get offered on the floor of the House of Representatives. And you can have a debate on the amendments, and sometimes they pass, sometimes they don't. I believe that Albany is cutting off so much of what you might call regular order, what you might call a healthy, functioning process. What happens at the end of this 3 persons in a room process is that a bill gets sent to the state legislature, and they're basically told, you need to vote for this. You have to vote for this. And then some state senator, state assemblyman raises their hand behind closed doors like, listen, I don't even know what this is. They're being told to vote for a bill that doesn't even exist yet because they're still printing them and they're waiting to get presented to it. And what happens is, and this has happened to me, I'd sit there as a state senator, and a bill this thick pops down on my desk, hot off the presses. It was just printed. And as it's popping down onto my desk, they're calling a vote on the bill. Because now normally you're supposed to wait a few days to give time to be able to read it, ask questions, to vet it out. Media would be able to report on it. Maybe some changes are necessary. But they would do a message of necessity from the governor. And out of necessity, they would then be instantly calling for a vote. So you would have to either vote for or against a bill that just came down on your desk that didn't exist 5 seconds ago, and you have to vote yes or no, and it's a very consequential budget. By the way, at the end of the process, at the end of the legislative session, they do this again. Like the first couple days of June, the legislature is scheduled to be in session. They would go all night long. Here's another honorary, we'll call this the honorary 12th plank of the agenda. Maybe this is something that actually should get added for next time. So at the end of this session, they would do an all-nighter. And there were 63 state senators. And around 5:30 in the morning, there were about 13 people left in the chamber. I remember Gustavo Rivera. He's currently the Health Committee chairman. I remember him with his head down on his desk. He was sleeping, but at least he was there. There were dozens of state senators who were not even in the chamber. They were sleeping elsewhere at home, on couches, I don't know, but they weren't there. Now, in order to vote against the bill, you have to be in your chamber raising your hand to vote no. And if you're not in your seats, raising your hand to vote no, it's recorded as a yes. So the dozens of people who were sleeping on their couch and in their apartments were voting yes all night long on all of these different bills. So the last bill would be called the Big Ugly. And the Big Ugly would be one of those bills that were about this long, and around 5:30, 6 a.m. it would plop down on our desk, and it was filled with all sorts of different ideas that could not pass in the light of day at any other point during session, and they were all just jammed into this one really big bill, and with the message of necessity of the governor, they were calling for a vote on it, and guess what? The Big Ugly would pass with flying colors, and no one had any idea what was inside of it. So I would say that first and foremost, to answer your question, it's about integrity, it's about following the rules, following the laws, and just improving the culture and having a government that you can be proud of. We can debate, we can disagree, but at the end of the day, we try to find common ground however possible. Georgetown University ranks all the members of the House based on how bipartisan they are. In 2020, I was the 19th, out of 435, I was ranked the 19th most bipartisan member of the House. In 2019, I was ranked the 12th most bipartisan. Out of 435, now people would say, well, how is that possible? Because you speak up on things that you care about that are controversial, you can't possibly be bipartisan. That's what some would say. Well, the thing is that it's our job to try to find common ground however possible, regardless of where we're from, whatever our ideology, whatever is the party we belong to, and whether we're part of the majority or the minority. I would add that I believe that everything that we proposed here today would help restore trust in Albany, and that's why we're here today to propose it this morning, sir.
You've got to get through a primary before you can run for governor as well. Any thoughts, number one, on their maybe moving the primary to August, and is that going to mess up your schedule? And also, where do we've got a lot of Republicans this year, which is kind of rare in New York State to have this. Where do you sit in the whole thing? Not just, you're the front runner, but also where you sit. Are you the most conservative, the least conservative? You don't like to put labels on yourself.
First off, my understanding is that there are two primaries, that the state Senate and House primary will be August 23rd. June 28th will be a primary in both parties, and it'll be statewide. Every single Republican and Democrat in the state of New York on June 28th will have the opportunity to go to the polls. I'm on day 4 of a 6-day trip all across New York. As a matter of fact, when I first announced for governor on April 8th, my very first visit was to Syracuse. I was at the Palace Theater and traveling around Onondaga County. That was the first place where we launched our very first event to start it off, and we're going to keep coming back over and over and over again. And that includes between now and June 28th. For any Republicans who are out there, registered Republicans, I'm asking for their support. I believe that it's important to show up to earn someone's support. I believe that it is important to keep showing up to earn keeping their support. We have worked hard now for over a year to earn the support of not just Republicans in New York State, but New Yorkers of all walks of life. I've spent a lot of time with registered Democrats and independents, because in this state we have New Yorkers of all walks of life with different views. But I'll tell you what, all New Yorkers across the state are talking about their breaking point right now. They are thinking about leaving New York. They feel like their wallets, their safety, their freedom, and their kids' education are under attack. They feel like if they go to some other state, that their money will go further, they will feel safer, they will live life freer, so they are deciding that they are gone. First and foremost, I'm hearing from people who care about crime and public safety. I believe that we should repeal cashless bail. I believe that judges should have discretion to weigh dangerousness and flight risk and past criminal record and seriousness of the offense on all offenses. We should fire district attorneys who refuse to enforce the law, like Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg. And I was raised in a law enforcement household. I was actually raised in 2 law enforcement households. My parents were divorced and remarried. I spent the week in one law enforcement household. I spent my weekend in another law enforcement household. I believe that we need to be doing more to keep our streets safe, our subways safe. We want New Yorkers to feel safe, secure, and free in New York. And we want them to feel like the attack on their wallet is finally being reversed. This is a rescue mission to save our state. So for any registered Republicans who are watching, I encourage you to go to my website at zeldinfornewyork.com to learn more about my views. All of our press releases are there. We are on social media too. And I would encourage everyone to get involved. It's not just a right to vote. It's a duty to vote. It's an obligation to vote.
Are you getting, local Republican parties to back? I mean, there's no local people here with you. I just wondered, is that...
Well, Alice and I are making this is the 2 of us here this morning, making our first joint appearance together to offer up our specific plan. We were actually we were in Onondaga County 2 days ago. We were at Gigi's Playhouse fundraiser for Down syndrome, a great cause, raising money. I would encourage people to learn more about Gigi's Playhouse and to support these families and these children who need help. Gigi's Playhouse is it's a cause not just across our state but across our country. And I was actually there with a whole bunch of Onondaga County Republicans and Democrats and Independents. People of all walks of life were there for a great cause. We are on our way next this morning to Binghamton. Then we are in Albany after that. And we'll just continue to travel crisscrossing this entire state. But many of our stops have through Onondaga County have been big events with the Onondaga County Republicans. And actually my last stop, my last visit through was with the Syracuse Republicans. They did a fundraiser that I was honored to be at. Great turnout, over 100 people. And we'll keep coming back, and maybe it'll just be Alice and I one day. Maybe it'll just be me one day. Or maybe it'll be 100 or 400 with us that day. But today Alice and I are here for our first joint appearance together with the media in Syracuse. Thank you for being here.